Welcome to the beautiful windswept village of St Abbs, located just 10 miles north of the Anglo-Scottish border on Scotland's rugged Berwickshire coast. Famed as one of the most beautiful villages in Scotland, St Abbs offers picture postcard views all year round, including on windy winter mornings like today. And inevitably, the village's beauty has led it to become a popular tourist and holiday home spot, while even taking a starring role in Hollywood blockbusters in the past. We'll talk more about that later, but on this walk around the heart of St Abbs, we'll explore the captivating history to be found on its few streets and around its centuries-old harbour. For the vast majority of its history, St Abbs has been a fishing village first and foremost, and home to just a handful of residents, almost all of whom were engaged in the traditional fishing industry. However, although fishing has taken place in the waters off this part of the coast for centuries, the village that we can see around us has actually only been in existence for around 200 years. That first permanent settlement gave birth to the many traditional buildings that make up the village today, perched on the steep slope down to the sea. Here, we can see one of the most popular traditional buildings in St Abbs, a former smokehouse, where herrings caught off the coast were smoked and made into kippers, a classic breakfast food which is said to have originated from the village of Sea Houses just 30 miles south of here, across the English border. Kippers were once big business for fishing villages like Sea Houses and St Abbs here, but today the old smokehouse here has been converted into the cosy Ebbcarrs Café, which is one of the most popularly frequented spots in St Abbs' busy tourist trade. Of course, like many historic fishing villages across the UK, St Abbs now makes the most of its picturesque surroundings to draw in visitors, with tourism, particularly in the summer, now serving as a key element of St Abbs' economy since the decline of Britain's fishing industry in the latter decades of the 20th century. Happily, however, fishing continues to this day in St Abbs, with the village retaining a fully operational harbour, as we can see before us here. But before we take a dive into the history of the village's harbour, it's helpful to first get a clearer image of exactly where in the country St Abbs is located. As you can see from this map, St Abbs sits on Scotland's south-eastern coast, just north of the border town of Berwick-upon-Tweed over in England. As we mentioned, this region of Scotland is historically known as Berwickshire, a remnant from the era when Berwick-upon-Tweed was a Scottish town, and the surrounding landscape here in St Abbs is emblematic of the image of Berwickshire, lined with great cliffs and dangerous crags which the violent and freezing cold waves of the North Sea have been crashing against for millennia. What's more, the cliffs and crags, combined with the notoriously perilous waves, have made this one of the most dangerous parts of Britain's coast, and the danger of the sea is sadly one that the village of St Abbs knows all too well. We'll talk more about that later on in our walk, when we get a glimpse of the coastline from up on high. But we now find ourselves looking over St Abbs' historic harbour. The harbour as we see it today was first built from 1831, and later expanded over the course of the 19th century, serving as a vital coastal haven for years. And at the heart of the harbour here, there stands St Abbs' 110-year-old lifeboat house, which was built in 1911 and which has been saving lives off the coast here for decades. Originally, the lifeboat house was opened by the RNLI in the aftermath of a deadly crash of a Danish ship on the rocks here. But since 2015, the station has been an independently run charity. What's more, St Abbs' current lifeboat, known as the Thomas Tunnock, is one of the fastest lifeboats in use in all of Britain, allowing the lifeboat team to keep fishermen and others safe when out on the rough seas off the coast here. But given the inherent dangers of the sea here, how and why exactly did St Abbs develop into a busy fishing village? Well, as we mentioned earlier, the village that we know today has only existed for the best part of 200 years, and it was the case that this location was originally not seen as an ideal place for settlement, perched between great cliffs and littered with dangerous rocks. However, the village's origins go back to when it was merely where fishermen who lived further inland would work for the day, but typically not live permanently. More specifically, fishermen from the neighbouring village of Coldingham, around 1.5 miles inland, would commute here daily for their work. And this is how St Abbs gained its original name, Coldingham Shore, simply as an extension of the inland village, and by no means a permanent settlement of its own. However, as fishermen had to walk 1.5 miles with all of their gear in the morning, work all day, and then walk back to Coldingham at night, the commute began to prove rather arduous for many, and so to remove that hardship, a number of fishing families decided to build their own little cottages here at Coldingham Shore. Initially, this development was very gradual, and it was only around the 1830s that this craggy part of the coast had become home to a community of its own, with around 16 families having settled by that time in what was to become a brand new coastal village. Now, as we've mentioned, the 1830s was the time when the local harbour first began construction, and this was an important step, as it changed this piece of shoreline from an especially perilous, harsh environment into one that was genuinely conducive to modern fishing. As such, this new infrastructure helped to attract more fishermen and their families to move here, and with more fishermen and boats came a need to expand the harbour, which then attracted more new workers, and so on and so forth. In short, the growth in population and fishing boats led to a great boost in this village's productivity, and by the end of the 19th century, Coldingham Shore was very much a village in its own right, home to almost 400 people, just 100 years on from when this area was almost entirely unsettled. With a distinct community, this village then took its own name, St Abbs, named after St Abbs Head, a large rocky headland to be found just north of here up the coast. St Abbs Head is best known for its 19th century lighthouse that stands on the edge of the cliffs, but it was in turn named after an early medieval abbess, St Ebba, whose name pops up all over this part of the world. The Ebbcarrs Café we passed earlier and the Ebbcarrs Rocks down in the water below us both also take their name from St Ebba, who is said to have once run a monastery up on St Abbs Head, although any trace of such a monastery is long since gone today. The tale of St Ebba's medieval monastery does, however, tell us of how long this part of Scotland has been inhabited, but as we've discussed, the 19th century is when St Abbs as we know it really came to life, around its growing fishing industry. However, the increase in the number of boats fishing out on the violent seas put more locals in peril, a peril that reared its head most infamously in 1881. That was the year of the Great East Coast fishing disaster, when a major storm along the Berwickshire coast caused the deaths of 189 fishermen out at sea, 3 of whom were from St Abbs here. Overlooking the harsh rocks and deep waters to which many of those were lost, this small memorial marks the shocking loss of life from that day, which devastated communities in this part of Scotland, particularly in the fishing town of Eyemouth just to the south of here, where most of the 189 men who died came from. The wide-ranging loss of life destroyed many families, and the memorial here depicts exactly that, portraying horrified women and children left helpless on shore as they looked out to the turmoil at sea. Unveiled in tandem with a larger memorial looking out to sea in Eyemouth, this is one of the most striking memorials you'll find in Britain, and a devastating reminder of the perils of St Abbs Coastline and the danger faced by fishermen here for centuries. Beneath the memorial, we can see the Ebbcarrs Rocks, some of the most dangerous crags for boats in St Abbs, and the rocks against which a Danish steamer crashed back in 1907. It's said that, as the ship wrecked against the rocks, its crew were left screaming for help, while the villagers of St Abbs looked on, unable to rescue them amid the lashing waves. Lifeboats, propelled by oars, were launched from nearby towns, but they could do nothing to reach the stricken crew. However, this was the incident which prompted the opening of St Abbs' own lifeboat station in 1911, which we saw earlier in the harbour, and which has been responsible for saving countless lives since. Now, despite the rather surprising palm trees to be found here, St Abbs is subject to an often harsh climate in the winter, with heavy winds and colder temperatures that mean the village is rather quiet at this time of year. Of course, the village's dedicated fishing families continue to work hard whatever the weather, but nowadays, not everybody here is a fishing family. Once upon a time, pretty much everybody in St Abbs was indeed involved in fishing, but today the village is now the site of many holiday homes. Many of the houses you'll find in St Abbs, such as on the road overlooking the harbour and sea here, belong to people who don't live in the village permanently, but who might come to stay here on holiday or for a break, to take in the staggering coastal views and calm atmosphere of St Abbs. Nowadays, it's estimated that roughly a third of all the houses in this village are holiday homes, but it's a fact which has caused a lot of local debate. On the one hand, while they're not occupied all year round, it's said that holiday homeowners have restored many old houses and brought more money into the local economy. On the other hand, however, higher demand from wealthier, so-called out-of-towners has driven local house prices to much higher levels, with some people who work in St Abbs no longer able to afford to live here, which has led to a bit of an exodus of locals and families with long-standing roots in the village. Now, as you can see from the quiet roads around us on this winter's morning, when many holiday homeowners are away, this once bustling fishing community is a much quieter place. But as we now make our way away from the shore, there's no denying that tourism is a key part of St Abbs' local economy, and has been for a lot longer than you may think. Even back in the early 20th century, when fishing was still booming, St Abbs was often awash with visitors from all around Britain. Spotting an opportunity in response to the influx of tourists, local families here opened a variety of facilities to cater to them, including cafes like the one we saw earlier in the old smokehouse. But as for St Abbs locals, there's just one place to go for all your daily needs, and that's the single village shop, here on Murrayfield. Located in what was once just another house, this village shop sells anything and everything, from newspapers to snorkels, cleaning products, postcards and much more, effectively functioning as a post office, a newsagent's, a tourist gift shop, and everything in between, having become the lifeblood of St Abbs over the years. Of course, pretty much everybody in St Abbs has a car as well, with all larger supermarkets, or other shops for that matter, a long drive away, either in Eyemouth or even further away in Berwick-upon-Tweed. But what if you don't have a car? How then can you get in and out of St Abbs? Well, unless you're sailing in via the harbour, the only option is the bus, which runs rather regularly, with services every couple of hours to Eyemouth and Berwick. There are 2 bus stops in the village here, one overlooking the sea, and one that we'll pass at the end of this residential street, which has a strikingly different appearance to the rugged seaside fishing village that we've been exploring so far. With the rolling hills and crop fields in the background, this part of St Abbs looks like a quaint countryside village, complete with a rather lovely putting green here, which is open for residents and visitors alike. Beautifully maintained by local volunteers, you can pop into the village shop, back around the corner, and borrow balls and putters if you fancy a game here. And behind the putting green, you might be able to see a tractor ploughing the fields, which shows us a lesser known side of the local industry, agriculture. Though having played second fiddle to fishing for the vast majority of the village's existence, Agriculture has been carried out on the fields behind the coastal cliffs here for a long time too, continuing to this day. However, it is without doubt tourism that St Abbs has come to count on most significantly in recent years, particularly after the fall of Britain's historic fishing industry. In the 1970s, fishing across the country began to enter into a strong decline, as fish stocks in the sea fell, and a variety of other international factors made the traditional industry far less profitable than it once was. Like many other former fishing hubs on Britain's east coast here, the introduction of new rules and regulations, including fishing quotas and the European Union's Common Fisheries Policy, spelled disaster for many local fishermen. But as they faced a dramatic decline in the industry that had given birth to their village, St Abbs locals saw the need to make a change in the village. And while tourists had been coming to St Abbs for a long time, the village began to build the infrastructure needed to cater to more visitors. Here, we find the former village school, which has now been converted into a cafe, as well as St Abbs Village Hall. Part of the building is now known as the Ebba Centre, and it's also the home of St Abbs Market, where local traders still sell their goods, and which is a bit of an attraction to many visitors too. Now in the winter, with fewer tourists about, the old school is used as an important community centre, but it can get very busy during the summer, as tourists flock to the village to take in its scenery and to explore its captivating history. However, those aren't the only reasons that tourists come to St Abbs. Recently, the village has experienced a bit of a boom on the back of its appearance in a popular Hollywood film of 2019, a film that was so popular in fact, that it went on to become the highest grossing film of all time. That movie was the smash hit superhero blockbuster, Avengers Endgame, and St Abbs starred in a popular scene as New Asgard, a new homeland that was settled by the hero Thor. This still from the movie shows St Abbs Harbour starring as New Asgard, with the Incredible Hulk in the foreground where we were at the start of our walk exploring the harbour. Of course, the village was much changed with CGI and special effects in the movie, but the appearance of St Abbs has led to a real resurgence of tourism, with the village even capitalising on this trend by changing its welcome sign to being twinned with New Asgard. But while the village's comic book pedigree has certainly gone up in stock, here on the inland edge of St Abbs, we find the final landmark on our walk around the village today. Standing tall on a mound overlooking the village centre, this is St Abbs Church, which opened back in 1892. That was around the time when St Abbs established itself as a separate village to Coldingham inland, although Coldingham is itself an important centre of religion, home to a medieval priory that was tightly linked with the fishing that took place on the shore here at the time. But unlike the fishermen of yesteryear, we won't be trekking all the way into Coldingham on this windy winter's day. Instead, it's here that we've reached the end of our walk around the wonderfully windswept village of St Abbs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're now looking forward to making a visit to St Abbs for yourself in future too.